guest is Brent Chandler. Brent, are you online here? There we are.
Yeah, absolutely.
There we go. Brent's one of the founders of Dekunu Technologies. I'm just reading what we got here for Brent. Originally from Melbourne, now jumps at Byron Bay. Is that correct?
Yep.
Based at Byron Bay. Yep.
Mostly.
Bit of a coding guru, I understand. Know a little bit about computers and whatnot, and the skydiving. So I'll hand this over to you, Brent, and we can take it from there.
Great. Thank you very much. Look, guys, what I wanted to talk about today was data in skydiving. Obviously, I started up Dekunu a few years ago with one of the aims to collect as much information about skydiving as possible through our devices and our technologies. And so over the next hour, I'm going to take you through some of the different ways that we've been collecting data, some of the different ways that that's being used for skydivers during skydiving and after skydiving, and some of the larger applications of data collection in skydiving as well. So I wanted to keep this not as an advertisement for Dekunu, but rather just talking about data and some of the different ways that that can really benefit our sport. And so I want to keep this like a bit of a conversation as well. Use the chat room and ask me any questions in there, because I'm going to be talking about a lot of things. I tend to rant, so just keep the questions coming, and I'll try and answer as much as possible as we go. So the first thing I wanted to talk about was the evolution of data in skydiving. And for the longest time in skydiving, we've been collecting data fairly rudimentary. In fairly rudimentary ways. So with paper logbooks and people writing down their recollections of their jumps. And these tend to have some benefit for people when they start skydiving, maybe for your first 50 jumps, almost as a bit of a nostalgic capability to look back and see what jumps you were doing when you first started. But then after that, they quickly loses the value for the bigger picture in terms of comprehensively logging what has happened and the benefits of that. Things like, what type of aircraft, what type of equipment, what altitudes, what type of jumps, who else you were jumping with, to collectively and comprehensively log all of this information manually is a little bit time consuming, and more often than not, it's not done as effectively as what it could be. And even then, even if it is, it's not able to be analyzed or find trends or to be able to combine that with other people's data. And so by moving into the modern world and having digital logbooks and digital data collection technologies really allows us to get some super powerful insights on that. And so that's not just from jump numbers itself, but really being able to find out some good information. So I'm going to be showing you some pretty cool stuff over the next hour as to some of the things that we have been doing with the data that Dekunu has collected, and I've got a few videos to show you about how that's being used and so on. So just to give you some stats to start off, what we have done so far with Dekunu. We've got users around the world who have got our devices. We've got 95 countries now with Dekunu devices in it. The top being the States, then Australia, Germany, France, and Spain. And with that, we have had 150,000 jumps synchronized to our servers. So I'm just going to show a quick video now. I'm not sure how familiar everybody is with the Dekunu platform, with these data collection tools. So I'm just going to show a little video to get started, just showing the actual device in use. So hopefully you'll all be able to see my screen. Let's have a look. Nothing's coming up there, is it? Not yet. Okay, here we go. Okay, so you should be able to see one of our altimeters. This is in plane mode. Wade, do you want to just give me a thumbs up that you can see it? Fantastic. So as you can see here, we've got the ground speed on the left. We've got the heading of the aircraft. We've got the distance to the spot over there under where it says miles. We've got the climb rate and obviously the altitude. So that's what's shown to people when they're on the plane on the way to height. Just by having access to a little bit more information than just the altitude, this makes our skydiving really, really informative, where we're not needing to yell back to the pilot. We're getting this live updated information constantly. It's helping us to be more aware. As soon as somebody jumps out of the plane, then we see their altitude and some big color bars. This all happens automatically as soon as they jump into free fall. And having this nice big screen makes that nice and easy to read as well. As soon as they deploy, the device goes into Canopy mode, shows them their ground speed, their tracking direction, and their altitude as well. So this is the basics of the Dekunu device and what you see when you're actually using it skydiving. And then all of the data that is collected on these devices, which is far more than just GPS. We've got accelerometers, magnetometers, gyroscopes, two barometers, the GPS on there. We've got humidity sensors, temperature sensors. We've got a huge amount, and it's logging at up to 18 times every second. And this allows us to collect a large amount of data and then to do large amounts of data analysis on it. And so the things that we can learn from that are really quite extraordinary. And the data that we've collected has been collected from around the world, like I said before, 95 countries. And if you can see my screen now, this is a map of all of the data that we have collected around the world so far. At the as you can see, it's extraordinary how wide and how far this reach has been already in such a short amount of time. And one of the cool things about this is we've learned a lot. And when we first started Dekunu, we didn't come out and say, okay, we know what the best possible type of skydiving is. We know what the best possible use of this information is. What we wanted to do was to make a really accurate data collection device and then be able to learn from that and speak to as many industry experts as possible from as many different disciplines and as many different types of skydiving as possible, and then learn what we can do with that data. And that's been one of the most interesting things that we've been able to do. And so one of the things, hold on, I'm just loading up my video here. Let me have a quick look at the questions. Okay, so has there been, this is from Sonia, has there been any data collection from all the cutaways, reserve rides that has made any strong arguments for or against RSL, Skyhook, etc.? Have there been any consistent data patterns collected by Dekunu that show one choice is better than the other? So this is what one of the cool things is. With these, the data that we collect, we're able to do annotations on it. And basically this means that the more that we know about the data, the more specific we can get with the analysis. So when something's happened, if there's been a malfunction, hard opening, somebody landing off, cutaway, whatever it might be, if we know that, then we can add that information into the data, and then that helps us to do analysis on it. So, so Sonia, to answer your question yet, we haven't got comprehensive malfunction information yet to be able to say if RSL or cutaway, RSL or Skyhook is better. But the good thing is that we are collecting that information. And so later on in this presentation, I'm going to be talking about some of the equipment tracking that we can do, which is going to be beneficial for things like maintenance, things like analysis of cutaways and things like that.
Cool, thanks,
what is
Brent.
yeah, no worries. I'll get to more information on that later. So Robo has got, what is the percentage of Dekunu users versus total number of skydivers worldwide? Look, it's a good question. And the number of skydivers worldwide is a bit of a blurred question in itself. So what we've tried to do is, we've got devices in as many places as possible. What we are trying to do with the Dekunu data collection platform is open that up to any other manufacturers that create smart LTs. So we've been working with FlySight. We're going to be opening up the Dekunu cloud to all FlySight users so that we can be collecting information and performing the data analysis for FlySight users as well. Because we do want to cover as many bases as possible and not restrict it to just Dekunu users. And that's been one of the things that we've been working on solidly for the last 6 months. And so we're not sure exactly what that percentage is yet, but obviously we're trying to get it as big as possible too. So some of the applications of the live data of the post-jump analysis, what we can do is once you get down from a jump, we're able to have a look at the data very quickly. So your data will synchronize wirelessly from your device. You don't need to take it off your wrist. You don't need to plug it into a computer. It will automatically wirelessly synchronize with our servers. And then you can jump on, you can have a look at some 2D analysis, 3D analysis, having a look at exit points and exit speeds, how your landing was, where your swoop ended, whatever that might be, which is super cool to do just for one jump. But where it gets really interesting is when you've got either multiple people wearing devices at the same time, or when you've got multiple jumps that you overlay over each other. So I'm going to share my screen again and show you some pretty cool visualizations that we've got. Here is, so we went to Eloy at the start of the year to the Project 19 warm-up camp. So if you can see my screen here, you can see there was about 40 people on this jump, all wearing Dekunu devices. And we can see here, the yellow lines are the canopy, blue is free fall. And so we can see here the two different break-off waves that actually occurred. And so we can now rewind and fast forward, going back to the actual jump, press play here, and we can see the first break-off wave coming through and deploying their canopies, and then the second one coming through as well. So like the power of this for being able to organize big waves has been super helpful, because if somebody is trying to get to the formation and getting there quite late, then we can use this information, which is instantly available once everybody lands, to be able to then rewind and fast forward and possibly change somebody's slot, change which plane they were on, to be able to give them a better chance to get to the formation quickly. Then what it does as well, we can analyze canopy traffic and the canopy patterns by fast forwarding to the end. So here at Eloy, if anyone's familiar, we've got a pretty nice landing area, this green patch over here, and they split the landing area. So there's no crossing the center line. And we can go back through, have a look at the data, and be able to see at the end of the jump, did anybody cross that center line? And if so, then we could have a chat to them and try and find out why. But as you can see here, everyone's flying in and there's nobody crossing over. So that's, from the one big way, a super safe landing for everybody. Okay, I think I just saw a question come up, did I? Do I have to stop my screen sharing for that? Let me have a look. Okay, so this is from Ben Nordkamp. On my last jump, I had a very bad opening where I broke the femur on opening. Is the data on the Dekunu that might show how hard it was? Yes, absolutely. So whether it's through the accelerometers that we have on board, the barometers showing how quickly the descent slowed down, or the GPSs as well. So Ben, if you'd like to shoot me an email afterwards, I think you've already got it. We can have a look at when that jump was and get the data, and then perform some analysis on it to be able to find out just how many Gs you pulled when that happened. I think that would be very interesting for sure. And you know, that's one of the other things. I'm going to be jumping around here a little bit depending on these questions, so keep them coming in. One of the things that we like to be able to do once we've got comprehensive data is to be able to do incident analysis. There's a really good example of there was an aircraft in Turin, an aircraft crash in Turin. Everybody on board was fine. And one of the users, one of the jumpers on board had a Dekunu device on. So let me just load up a video here, which has got the Channel 9 report. And then I'll be able to show you some analysis that we did on that. So sorry for the hold up getting my screen sharing. I've got a lot of tabs open here. Okay, so hopefully you can hear that.
There's no audio there, Brent.
No audio, okay.
Divers and their pilot had miraculously walked away uninjured after their light plane crashed into a paddock at Turin, southeast of Melbourne. As Mike Santo-Martino explains, the plane's engine shut down seconds after takeoff, with their dramatic crash landing captured on camera.
A split second from impact. 4 skydivers and their pilot hit the ground alive.
Kick that
door! One by one, they scramble out the side door of the single-engine Cessna, forced to make an emergency landing.
Oi, there's fuel, let's go.
They sprint to the safety of a private dirt road, adrenaline pumping.
Holy
Praising the pilot that steered them to safety.
You're a lifesaver, mate.
Hugging as they realise how close they came to death.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm right.
Yep.
The Cessna Skyhawk took flight at 10:30 this morning for Skydive southeast Melbourne, but barely made it 2 kilometres from the Tooradin airstrip when its engine shut down.
At about 400 feet, the engine's just failed. So what he's done is look for a spot to land and found this spot. At 400 feet, when you've got 5 people on board, there's not a lot of time to think.
Fuel poured over the cabin as both its tanks ruptured, but the Cessna didn't catch fire. The 5 on board walking away with little more than a blood nose.
All 4 occupants.
All right, so I'll just stop that one there. So as you can see, you could see one of the Dekunu devices on board in that video there. And then we were able to assist the ATSB in the official investigation by providing comprehensive data for that particular incident. And so our devices, they start collecting data as soon as the plane is taken off. So we're able to provide never before seen data for these types of situations, which has been really, really invaluable. And so we want to be able to continue collecting this information and finding new ways that it can be applied in different situations, which is, well, you know, that's just one example of the way that it can be used. So I'm going to go back and show you a couple more visualizations here, some live visualizations. We've got a full plane load of tandems at Byron. And so we can just play here. Every one of the tandems had one of our devices on. And so this is played in real time. And so you can see the first one exiting here. And I've just put on these vertical indicators to show what their altitudes is. And we can see here, we can look back over, have a look at the vertical separation, have a look at the horizontal separation, and be able to make sure that, say, people aren't flying into jump run, if it was fun jumpers, making sure there is enough separation there. And this is just for the free fall component. So I can speed that up a little bit and have a look at the end, and we can see a really nice, clean, horizontal separation between and vertical separation of all of the tandems. And then after the tandems, we've got a wingsuiter that jumps out. If I just fast forward that, we can see that wingsuiter and the navigation path that they decided to choose. Being able to have access to this is great for situations for DSOs to be able to use, to be able to make decisions about changing the spot. For example, like this is a really good load to show for this. We've got this last tandem here on the right-hand side. There was a bit more of a separation gap, and there was a tandem and then 2 people chasing the tandem. This was a while ago, and the people chasing the tandem, they managed to get back, but the actual tandem couldn't. So I've just focused the view here onto the tandem, and you can see all of the other tandems making it back into the drop zone here at Byron Bay. And then this last group, the 2 fun jumpers that we're chasing, I'm just fast forwarding here a little bit, able to make it back. But here, this is when the tandem master decided to choose an off landing and be able to go back and land somewhere safely in a paddock. And so now what we can do, we've got access to this information. With somebody landing off, the DSO might automatically decide to change the spot and say, okay, well, let's change the spot. Now we've got the capability to look at the information, rewind, go back to the point of exit and say, okay, well, there was an extra 10-second delay there. Maybe we don't need to change the spot. Maybe we need to find out what that delay was, and maybe we need to change that and have a look at who's on the load and have a look at why that happened and be able to go back and analyze that, which is super handy. You know, it might have been a navigational issue. It might have been, you know, it could have been the spot, but we can then go back, have a look, and rewind, fast forward, which is super handy for us to be able to do. Okay, let me get out of that one. Okay, so some other ways that the data can be used. Oh, wait 1 second. Okay, no more questions. Keep the questions coming in, guys. Another way that data can be used is for training and competition. Obviously, being able to give competitors an extra advantage extra insights into what they're doing. That's proven to be really helpful, whether that's with speed or formations or any type of competition. We really want people to be able to compare their data. And let's say somebody's honing in their swoops and they want to have a look at the information of their last 20 swoops or 30 swoops. Now they can overlay them over each other, find out where they're getting additional power, find out where they're losing power, see what their patterns look like leading up to it. And that's been really, really beneficial for us. Canopy courses as well. We've got Jesse Warren with the high fly courses around Australia, which has been really good. They've been taking some Dekunu devices around with them and being able to throw them onto their students and be able to analyze their patterns and be able to provide some really, really cool information for them as well. We have got a student mode on the devices, which is basically so that it's foolproof and it's not going to be providing additional distraction for students. All it does from the ground until they, all through their jump to the time that they land, is just show the altitude. Behind the scenes, it's still collecting all of this information, still uploading it, still able to be analyzed by the student or their instructor. And but whilst they are jumping, it is just in student mode and just shows them the altitude, which is great, so that they don't have anything else to distract them with. So I've got a little video here of the Jesse Warren's Canopy courses. It just goes for a couple of minutes, so hopefully we'll get some audio on this one as well.
Yeah, so I've been coaching for 3 or 4 years now, but it's been exciting, man. Like, you know, getting to observe jumpers, looking at skydiving from a different perspective. Everyone's really excited about learning new skills and new awarenesses. The Dekunu 3D Viz platform, we got to use it on the course that we did on the weekend. It was great to see students really embrace it. Each student got to take a device up, get familiar with it. We spend extra time debriefing each student. We don't want to skim over their jumps. So to be able to see it over a 3D map was really valuable. Gave them a really good insight as to their perception of their jump and what actually happened on their jump.
This is just so far ahead. Like, you know, you get heaps of different features in it. Like jump run shows you when you take off, like what ground speed is, which I found was pretty important.
In the last 2 years, it's come along a long way. It's very cool now.
You can see that you did something wrong or flew the plan that you made. Bam, that's really good.
The information we're feeding students and the tools that we're using to support that information are used from AF level all the way up to competitive swooping. So really valuable to have a tool that can span that whole skydiving career.
And in the end, it makes everyone safer.
Fantastic. So that's a really cool experience to be able to see those Dekunu devices being utilised on the fly with these Canopy courses, and you know, the more people that are jumping with data collection devices, and the more people that have access to this data, you know, the more tools and the more benefits that we can create from it, which is super cool. Some of the really interesting things that we can do with automatic data collection like this is to be able to have automated insights. So let's say, for example, 2 people are on different groups on the same load and open close to each other. They might not necessarily know that they opened close to each other. They might have been facing in different directions, but there could have been, you know, a potential incident there if their canopies opened it in a different direction. We can now utilize automated analysis to be able to show potentially concerning situations. Things like if those two people did open close together, for us to be able to get a notification, and for the DSO of the day to be able to have a look at that and be able to analyze why. Was it because the two groups exited too close together, or was it because they tracked towards each other during the jump, or a break off? It just so happened to be that those two people were tracking towards each other. For us to be able to have a look at that and analyze that. We've had some situations where we've had an angle group jumping out first, and then a couple of groups later, we've had a flat group. We've had an angle group take a particular navigation that seemed safe on the ground, and then the flat group is actually, through free fall drift, ended up in a similar trajectory and people opening close together. And now we have the ability to be able to have a look at this rather than just looking through GoPros and having a look at people's or discussing with people's own perspectives. Now we can have a look at the raw, unbiased data and be able to really analyze what happened, and then be able to make informed decisions for what's happening for the next group. Even with free fall drift, the wind on the ground might be 15 knots from the north, but there might be a wind shear where the wind's coming from the south during free fall. And that information we can now tell with the free fall drift, and DSOs can look at that, analyze it, and be able to make informed decisions about where the spot should be. And people making navigational decisions can make decisions based on what the actual winds are doing. So this is what we're really excited about, and we're working every day to make sure that we're creating tools to be able to provide this as conveniently as possible. Let's have a look here. There's a couple of questions coming in from Jess. Hey, Jess. Some people say that there should be weight classes for speed skydiving. Have you been able to get much data with speed and weights, or could you? Could we? Absolutely. Have we? No, not yet. So one of the things, we're always trying to find more information about the data that we have. So we've just rolled out equipment tracking. So now we can tell if people have cypresses, what canopies they've got, what rigs they've got. With the more information that we can collect, then we can do more automated analysis on it. So for example, if you and the other speed skydivers start collecting what your exit weights are, then we can start analyzing that. And if we've got enough data to be able to then compare it with whilst wearing weights and whilst not wearing weights, then we can very quickly and very easily be able to see what the performance difference is. Obviously, there's a lot of moving parts with speed skydiving, and if you've had a bigger lunch or wearing a slightly thicker suit or whatever it might be, that could have more of an effect than wearing 10 kilos of lead. But for sure, we would be able to have a look and with enough information, be able to, if there is a significant difference, be able to show some insights on that. Thanks for that question. Ben, how about live data? Is it all stored on the device, or does it stream to a cloud somewhere? So it's initially stored on the device. So live data, we can't do, especially the way that these devices communicate is over Wi-Fi. So when the devices land and they're within Wi-Fi range, that's when they synchronize to our servers. Having live data of canopies and people in freefall would be super cool, and it's something that that we've discussed at length of ways that we could do. Down the line in the future, we could have some kind of supplementary device that could be used in competition scenarios to be able to relay the information collected on the device to a ground station using some other RF transmitter. And then what we would be able to do, then we can say provide that information to spectators on the ground, to judges, to trackers, to be able to find out even if people are landing off where they actually are. So yeah, really cool possibilities with that in the future, definitely. Are these accurately when in the cloud? From Henry? Absolutely. So one of the things that we've been working on from day one is accurate data collection, full stop. Now the analysis of that data, it's been something that we've been refining and refining over the years. One of the challenges with this is that there's so many different types of skydiving. If somebody's doing crew, or if someone's doing flat or vertical or speed, or a student or tandem, the data is collected with the same raw, unfiltered, unbiased methods. And then the analysis that we do, that will change. So for example, XRW, we've got a high performance canopy and a wingsuit pilot, and they're flying, and the data that they're collecting at the exact moment that, say, they're docked, the data's looking almost exactly the same. But our systems are able to analyze whether or not it's the Canopy pilot or the wingsuit. And that's by extrapolation from what's happened at the start of the action and what's happened at the end of the action. Obviously, the Canopy pilot in the XRW portion doesn't have a second deployment. So we can tell that that is that's a Canopy. And the visualizations are super cool as well, because you've got your yellow line for Canopy, blue line for wingsuit, and you can see them come together and then you see them break off. We've got some pretty good examples from Jason Dudunsky and Macca as well. I don't have them loaded up here, but I can get them afterwards. It's pretty cool. Ben, is there any thoughts on this going into the paragliding industry with these devices? Absolutely. So I'm an active paraglider and paramotorist as well, and we've already been putting together some different screens to be able to use these devices as variometers, to be able to collect information displayed in the Dekunu cloud. Our priority, first and foremost, is skydiving. This is where we've been pushing all of our efforts and focusing our attention. But we do want to create these devices to be multi-sport devices, and any air sport that you're doing, for these to be able to collect device and then be able to provide the analysis of that particular action that you're doing, whether that be paragliding or wingsuiting or tandems, which is super cool. Thoughts on how 5G will be able to be implemented into skydiving real-time data collection? Haven't put a lot of thought into it, mainly because what we've done with Dekunu, we focused super heavily on over-engineering our devices from a hardware perspective, so that we could just utilize that hardware base and then create updates and firmware changes for years to come. So there's still particular modules and elements of our devices that we haven't enabled yet, but we will be with firmware and software releases over the years. 5G technology, it's going to be fantastic for high throughput mobile data, for connected vehicles and connected devices, definitely. It's not something that we've got on our development plan to be able to utilize in our devices. We want our devices to be global devices. We want them to be things that you don't need to set the time with, you don't need to set your drop zone with. We want as much to be automated as possible using widely spread technologies that people don't need to pay a subscription model for. We want it to be, once you've got the device, everything else is free forever. All right, the questions are coming in nice and quick now. Are you guys using it as a trading tool for big wave builds, e.g. from the plane to formation? Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure if you saw the Project 19 visualization I showed just at the start. So we've had 40 people. It was a 2-plane load, 2 break-off wave formation. Really handy. We were out there at one of the Project 19 warm-up camps, being able to help them to be able to analyze what is happening with these warm-ups, what speeds they're flying at, how safe the break-offs were, how safe the canopy patterns were, what kind of information, how quickly formations are being built, where the slowest pods are forming, and so on and so forth. So we were really excited to be going over to the Project 19 record in Chicago. Obviously, that's been delayed, and that just gives us a little bit more time to refine our big wave functionality of the cloud as well. How secure is the data, and can it be stored on a LAN as opposed to the cloud? It's a good question. So data security is something that the community has shown us that they're very conscious about, and something that we've spent a lot of time making sure that it is protected and that it can't be used in any nefarious ways. For example, we can't sell anybody's data. Everybody who collects data with one of our devices, they have ownership rights to it. It is stored in the Dekunu clouds, which are encrypted. It has got the ability for the users to export all of their data if they want. The data is still saved on the devices. They can plug it into their computer and get an export from that in the raw formats as well if they want. To be able to save it to your local computer, yes, absolutely you can do, but it's a slower process. You need to physically plug it in and copy and paste rather than just it being connected to Wi-Fi and synchronizing. So having a visualization system, the Dekunu visualization system uses the data that's been collected and analyzed and made to be performant using our big data tools. So that's not available offline, but you can use any other data analysis tool. I mean, you can even import it into Excel if you want and be able to add your charts from there if you want. So that data is all unencrypted and easy to access from the device to your computer. Can we track jumpers approaching a big way in 3D, i.e. relative to a stadium? Yep, absolutely. And this is super fun to do as well, to be able to see how quickly people are building these formations. You know, if there was a hold up in the door, you can actually see there being a gap between people coming out of the plane, and then there was a 2-second gap. Someone got held up, someone left their seatbelt on, whatever it might be, and that actually taking a little bit longer for that formation to build, and how that's backing people up behind it. So super cool stuff there. Excuse me. Okay, so back to the videos that I've got here. So one of the really interesting things that that we've been working on is being able to provide anonymized access to this information for larger groups of people. So, for example, if we collect information from all of my skydives, that's kind of interesting to me, or if I've got a coach, it's interesting to them. But what we want to do is to be able to learn as much as possible from that. And sometimes doing aggregated analysis is a great way to do that. So being able to find out, you know, what the average exit height is of a particular drop zone, how many people are landing off every month for a particular location, how many jumps people are having, how current they are, what their average deployment heights are, what their equipment is, how often these things need to be maintained, and be able to provide insights to, say, manufacturers. One of the cool things that the equipment tracking is going to enable us to do is, let's say, let's give the Crossfire 3 as an example. Really good Canopy. They did a lot of test jumping over at NZA with it, and then they release it to the wild. What we want to be able to do is provide them access to this kind of data, the kinds of data that they wouldn't be able to get in their internal testing. So what is the average glide ratio of a Crossfire 3 109 over 5,000 jumps or 50,000 jumps, or when the humidity is 100%, or when it's super dry, or when it's super high altitude? How does this degrade over time? How often should the line sets be maintained? And to be able to prompt the users to actually do the line set changing once they have logged a certain number of jumps on these canopies. When canopies are getting sold, for us to be able to have a comprehensive track record of who's had it, how many jumps have been on it, what kind of environments have those canopies been in, and so on and so forth. We've been working with the team at Cypress to be able to provide them access to certain information with the user's approval. So for example, if you've got a Cypress 2, you're on a 4-year service cycle, that when you give your Cypress back to them, they have a look at all of the data that it's been collected, they do some analysis on it, and if you've got some high performance turns, for example, you might have been getting close to triggering a Cypress fire during your turn, and your settings should have changed. Now, they're not necessarily aware of that until that 4-year service cycle is up and they get a chance to look at it. So now what we're able to do with equipment tracking is, say, raise a red flag with the user themselves, saying, hey, you've said that you've got a Cypress. We've noticed that you're doing some high performance turns from height. Are your Cypress settings correct? Would you like to speak with Cypress directly and share your information with them? So this is now potentially circumventing 2 outs and giving another opportunity for us to be able to utilize the information and data that's collected from our devices for greater benefits for manufacturers and industries as a whole. Okay, a few more questions rolling in now. So from Roger, can we track, read that one out from Dan again. To tie in with Sonia and refer the Cypress chat had a while back, can the data be used to support the altitude offsets for types of containers and reserves, and the relation of deployment delays, transition from main to reserve, calculating speeds and height, etc. during malfunctions? Okay, so this question, Dan, do you want to just put your microphone on? If you can, and then let's sort of work through this question, if you're available. Nope. Just happy to type. All right. So I think let's go through the question again. Altitude offsets, yes. No mic, okay. No worries. So yeah, altitude offsets we can do on our devices. And one of the benefits of having a big screen device means that we don't need to be going through finicky little menus. Say, you know, it's always challenging with our AEDs. Whenever we're doing an in-hop somewhere, we're always going around the group, making sure everyone knows that up was up, down was down type thing. We've got the big screen, so we can actually communicate using common language, the ways to change your altitude offsets there. So can the data be used to support the altitude offsets for types of containers and reserves and the relation to deployment delays, transition from main and reserve, calculating speeds and height? Not too sure exactly what your question's asking there, I'm sorry, but yes, we can do altitude offsets and we can track different types of containers. Sorry if that doesn't fully answer your question there. Okay, so what else have we got here? One of the cool things, whenever we go to a new drop zone, we get a drop zone briefing, we have a look at the hazards, we have a look at where the main landing areas are, where the off landing areas are, and then we kind of don't get that sort of thrown into us again. And, you know, it's always up to the jumper to be responsible to make sure that they're aware of these hazards. And one of the cool things that we can do when people are analyzing their jumps, whether it's in 2D or 3D, is be highlighting these hazards. So I've just got a little photo here, which has got Toogoolawah and Byron Bay. Let me load this one up here. Okay, so we've got Byron Bay on the left, and we've got Toogoolawah on the right. So this is just two separate jumps, and you can see on the left, this red line was the jump run. The blue line is the free fall. So most likely a wingsuiter doing some pretty funky navigation, and then the yellow being the canopy coming back. And we've highlighted here, obviously, areas that you can't land, unideal but safe, other landing areas, green, nice landing areas. Here on the right, we've got Toogoolawah, and we've got all of the power lines highlighted here, safe landing areas. We've got the big tree in the landing area as well. And so just having this information constantly reiterated to us means that if there's a situation we're in an emergency and we need to know, okay, where was a power line? I don't want to be thinking back 5 years to when I had that initial drop zone briefing. It's always good that it's been burned into my memory every time I've looked at my jumps from this drop zone. And that's just another way that we can provide you know, access to comprehensive information that's convenient and easy for people to be constantly aware of. Okay, so any more questions coming through here? So what I'll talk about next is ways that every jump that we collect is a way that's adding to our information understanding. So one of the things that we want to be doing in the future is by applying big data analysis techniques and some machine learning, we want to be able to do predictive analysis. So if there is a certain situation that might happen, we want to potentially know about it before it occurs. So things like malfunctions and potentially dangerous situations, there might be a particular pattern that leads up to this. Maybe it's got to do with currency, maybe it's got to do with where the person's been jumping, who they've been jumping with, the types of jumps. And by learning as much as possible about all of the data that we collect, all of the malfunctions, all of the different environments, all of the different equipment and jumping types, then we can do some really, really important things. And if somebody is uncurrent and then automatically comes back and goes straight back into a high performance, big way jump, you know, it's a potentially concerning situation, and we all know that. But there might be other situations that through pattern recognition and comprehensive data analysis, we're able to actually predict. And that's one of the things that we're excited about doing in the future. And the more information that we have about the data now is going to enable us to do that. Okay, a question from Philip Blackhair. If COVID kills skydiving and I need to retrain, what coding languages would you recommend to learn? I have zero coding knowledge. Well, hopefully it's not going to kill skydiving. I'm pretty confident that it won't. You know, we're doubling down on all of our development with an expectation that skydiving is going to be coming back bigger and better and stronger than ever, and we're really excited for that. If you do want to get into development, JavaScript is the language of the future. it's had a resurgence over recent years, super powerful now, lots of server-side technologies with it. I won't go into too much of coding because I think we'll lose half the audience, and I'll talk for 3 hours about it. Okay, question here from Reggie. Gathering data to enable trajectory analysis while under Canopy opens up capabilities to record, analyze, and judge Canopy performances. What comes to mind is the accuracy and consistency of the information recorded. Can it be used as a judging platform? Absolutely, absolutely, and we're really excited about that. So, with accurate data collection, there are some considerations. So the most accurate way to be able to tell your altitude is through barometric pressure altitude calculations. Now, this is open to a lot of noise. Basically, we're making an altitude calculation from what the pressure is at that particular point. And then that pressure change, we're able to calculate what the altitude change is. Now, one of the things that happened, and we learned this in the early days of Dekunu, was we were getting big fluctuations in altitude of certain people in certain types of skydives. And we were seeing 300-foot differences, 400-foot differences, and we were trying to work out what was causing this. And so we did a lot of testing with our devices and a lot of other devices in the industry to be able to work out what was happening. And through micro-burbling, we were getting these pockets of high pressure and pockets of low pressure, which then needed to be smoothed out. And this has happened always, even with analog altimeters. Back when I was at the Cypress factory last year, we were having a look at some videos, and one of their save videos, a man had a chest-mounted analog altimeter and a wrist-mounted, and there's a freeze frame where those two devices are 400 feet out. He was on his back and spinning, creating a burble, which was a lower pressure on his chest than it was on his wrist, and there was a 400-foot discrepancy there. And so for us to be able to provide the most accurate altitude for people to be able to make informed decisions on their skydives, we do smoothing of the data. And that means that any micro burbles are minimized, and then we can do things like correlation of that data. We've got two barometers on board, one on each side of the PCB, so that it is going to be minimizing any micro burbling. But then also we've got the GPS. Now, GPS is great for horizontal positional accuracy, but not so great for vertical, and that's just by the nature of the technology itself. And there are a few meters of accuracy discrepancy when it comes to GPS altitude, but we can still use it as a gauge to whether or not the data is accurate. For example, if someone's in free fall and all of a sudden starts going up, in most situations, that's not accurate. And so we can cross-reference and corroborate with the GPS data to be able to confirm that. Now, with some wingsuits, they actually can go up. They can flare and go up. So it's not impossible to do, but based on what has happened before, highlights a probability of what is happening in the future is accurate. And so that's what we use. So just a little bit of a side rant there. To get back to your question, is it possible for this to be used for judging? Yeah, absolutely. And so we've seen, say, GPS data being used for speed skydiving now with the fly sites, which has created a far more accurate environment rather than barometric pressure altitude sensors being used, which could be manipulated by microburbling. And so having high accuracy data collection technologies for judging, absolutely. And it's just a matter of creating a particular platform and an access to this information that utilizes some consistent judging. Because when it comes to barometric pressure, say, for example, you're never going to be able to create a perfect altitude, but what you can do is create a consistent one. And that's something that we try and do as much as possible. So consistency is key. If you're at 8,000 feet and your altitude is showing 8,020 or 8,040, that's not going to make a world of difference to your skydiving. But if you're at 500 feet, it might have much more of an impact. The accuracy of the data is much more important there. So by creating a consistent platform is what we try and do. And yes, absolutely, being able to have judges utilize that for judging, definitely. Even things like classic accuracy, for example, you could do. You could use accurate data collection for if people are going for display licenses, maybe for them to be able to nominate their jump on their device beforehand, and then actually go and fly, and they can see whether or not they've landed within that, or even just for training before they go and do their nominations. And that's super cool for them to be able to do that and have a look and see exactly where they finished every time. Good question. All right, how are we going for time? We have gone a little bit over 12 o'clock, but we did start a little bit later as well. Were there any other questions from anyone before we finish up? I know it's been a very data-heavy hour, and for the technophobes out there, it might have been a little bit too techy, but I hope everyone got something from it. And if you have got any more questions, please either turn your microphone on and fire them over now, or shoot them into the group chat. You know, I've had a lot of fun talking about all of this stuff. I could talk for days about it. And yeah, it's been a really interesting journey of data collection. And, you know, we got asked the question, I think this is pretty important. We got asked the question the other day by a drop zone owner. We were providing a report to them about the average landing directions that they were having, the average jump run directions, the amount of jumpers that landed off for the month for them. And they asked me, they said, why do we need this? And I didn't have a great answer for them for the drop zone report, but what it did show me, and what we discussed about it was, you know, myself and the team at Dekunu, we're not sitting here saying we've got all of the answers as to what this should be, but we're trying to create as much possibility as possible. And with the feedback and the ideas from the community, we've already changed so much, and we've already been able to provide so much because of that feedback. So by having some little ideas, then that starts to spawn others, and we get challenged all the time by customers and friends of Dekunu with some ideas that they would love to be able to see, because we've got these data collection platforms, which is super exciting. All right, so Wade, we'll leave it at that if you like, or we can talk about programming for the next 3 hours. I'm happy either way.
No, that's fine. That's great, Brent. Interesting stuff. Does anyone have any other questions or anything? No more questions. I guess gone are the days of sausage suits and throw on a pair of goggles and the old school altimeters. I've just got in touch with Tom Noonan again, if he can come back on, if anyone's got other questions for him. So I might give it a few more minutes to see if he jumps back on. Are you willing to share any of your secrets for the future, Brent? What else has Dekunu got hidden away for us?
Yeah, for sure.
What's in the pipeline?
The last few months have been super busy for us. We once we started to see an effect from the COVID-19 shutdowns around the world, we all of a sudden had this opportunity where we weren't getting distracted by events and things that we were sponsoring and customers. Like sales dropped, all of the data that was flowing in stopped. And so we had the possibility to be able to sit down and say, okay, well, let's just bend over backwards, do as much development as possible. And then when skydiving comes back, release a whole bunch of things. So we've got some really cool stuff being released on the devices themselves and also in the cloud. So not going to talk specifics about it, but we will be promoting it heaps on our Facebook page, on our community forum, and within our cloud as well. But lots of stuff to be able to share your jumps with each other, to be able to compare them. And yeah, it's really exciting what we've been able to do. The other thing we have in the pipeline is something that we can talk about. We're creating a smart audible. And this is going to be something which is going to be complementary to the Dekunu One, or can be operated independently. And what this will do is it's going to be operating as a traditional audible, and with some extra functions. So you can control it from your Dekunu One or from your phone to be able to set your altitude heights. It will also be communicating via a mesh network with other audibles that are on the plane to be able to, let's say you've got a jump master and they want to be able to make sure that everyone's audibles are set correctly. They'll be able to see what they're set from their Dekunu One and be able to see if someone's got their setting correctly. It's going to be giving audio feedback. So rather than just high-pitched screaming, once somebody's under canopy, for them to be able to get spoken canopy alerts saying 4,000 feet, 3,500 feet. And then to be able to do cool things using Bluetooth Low Energy 5.0, which has got a 100-meter range. if people are within close proximity of each other when flying under canopy, for there to be proximity alarms. Let's say if people are flying in clouds, for them to be able to get an alarm. So lots of cool stuff that we're experimenting with there. No dates or details on when that's going to be released, and no specifics of what the actual end functionality will be. This is one of the things that we do when we are developing with Dekunu. We create a product, we do huge amounts of prototyping, and then we work out what is going to be the best, safest way to release the content. We got some great advice from Joe Stein in the early days of Dekunu when we were doing prototyping. And he said, you've got to be careful that you're not providing instruction to people, but you're providing information. And that was really good advice that we've taken on board. And one of the reasons that we've made certain decisions about not releasing particular features and releasing other ones. A good example of that is an arrow when you're under canopy showing you where the landing area is. This is something that we developed, something that we tested, and we didn't release because that's us showing, giving instruction to people rather than information. And we don't want people to be flying around their canopies just looking at their altimeters. We still want them to be aware, and we still want them to be able to have the information that can provide them so that they can make decisions as best they possibly can. And, you know, we've got a really active community. So when we get feature requests, we're able to sort of bounce ideas back and forth from the community and be able to refine the feature to be as best it possibly can be for all different types of disciplines and so on and so forth. So we're doing the same thing with the Audible. We'll create all of these ideas, we'll use them, we'll refine them down to what's appropriate for the consumer market, and then we'll release it, and hopefully it'll be the best Audible that we've ever had. All right, so I'll leave it at that, guys. I'm not sure if we've got Tom coming back on now, or...
Yeah, he's said he's 2 minutes out, so he'll be back in a second if people want to hang around and have a chat with, or ask Tom some questions. I'm sure he would have been interested in everything you had to say, Brett. Like, that's the kind of stuff that...
You know, it's pretty interesting. Over the last like 4 or 5 conferences around the world, we had the APF one in Australia, PIA in Texas, the European Skydiving Symposium in Poland. The Dekunu talk and the UPT talk have always been on at the same time. So it was the first time that I've actually been able to listen to one. It was really interesting. I liked that a lot. We have spoken a bit about how Dekunu can be providing some insights and information to the people doing these extreme skydives, and hopefully we can be involved in them in the future. We've done testing with our devices down to -40 degrees and up to 55 degrees as well. As high as the plane can go, we've been trying to test. The highest that we've been able to manage is 33,000 feet. We don't know if it works any higher, just because we haven't had the opportunity. If anyone's got a plane and would like to take me, I'd be happy to do it. But yeah, so that's super cool stuff that they're doing as well.
Very good. Awesome. Looks like Tom's back here. Has anyone got any questions for Tom while he's back, or Brent again, or anyone got any questions for anyone else? A lot of quiet.
Hey Brett, just out of curiosity, I don't know if you've gone and compared the Neptunes and the LMVs yourself, but in my experience, there's been at least an 80-foot discrepancy in height. So I'm just wondering if the Dekunu was closer to the LMV or the Neptunes. Do you know?
Yeah, so what we have found, before when I was talking about the microburbles and the data discrepancies, when we did our comprehensive testing, we did notice, and we could kind of determine what other averaging algorithms were being used from other manufacturers' altimeters. And there is always going to be slight discrepancies based on a couple of things, whether that's the Neptune has got a different type of water seal, which creates a slight delay in atmospheres balancing between outside of the device and inside of the device. It's a different technique to what what some of the LMB devices use, which is having the barometer directly exposed to the outside atmosphere. But then that's kind of corroborated or collaborated between software averaging. So when we first started creating the Dekunu and doing all of the prototyping, we had a really interesting decision that we had to make. We're like, do we want to make a device that is the most accurate altimeter, or do we want to make one that matches the industry expectation of what an altimeter provides? Now, whether your altimeter shows 12,000 feet or some arbitrary number, it's still just an indicator for us to be able to make a decision. And it was a really hard decision to make because we had multiple barometers. We were doing very comprehensive, very accurate tests. And we ended up choosing to create the most accurate that we possibly could, which means that between the LMB, between the Neptune, between the Dekunu ones and any other altimeter, whether that be audible based in your helmet, which has got a different pressure differential to the outside, or one that's on your wrist, or one that's chest mounted, there's always going to be a slight discrepancy. And that's the nature of barometric pressure based altitude calculation devices. And so what the best thing is to be consistent with your equipment. If you're always jumping an LMB, you know, you're familiar with that. It doesn't matter if that is at 5,000 feet, 80-foot difference to what a Neptune is, because it's that arbitrary number that you're used to. And you know, there's so much that can happen. If you've got a plane and it takes half an hour to get to height, on the ground the pressure might have changed, the weather might have changed slightly, and that's why sometimes you'll land and on any device it might say 50 feet or minus 50 feet. That's just based on the ground pressure being different from when you took off to when you landed. And so there's always going to be that potential there, and that's just the nature of the beast. So by having data that is multifaceted, having multiple barometers to be able to calculate differences on and average those out, and then being able to cross-reference against GPS altitude data as well, that's how we've decided and determined to be able to create the most accurate and consistent altitude device, both for live feedback of what the altitude is and then post-jump analysis as well. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thanks, Brent.